Precisely 74% of you shall die.
Hi, I'm Pete Novice. I'm in Osaka, Japan.
And I am Kitten McCreary Novice. I am in Los Angeles, California. And on this episode of The Naked Critics, we are going to be discussing Opus Pictures' 2013 Snowpiercer. So this was a movie that we both saw in theaters when it was released, so we did get to see it on the big screen. And now we've gone back and done a viewing of it on Netflix. So I guess with that first thing, I know when we went to see it in the theater, since we got to see it together, hooray! We both loved it. Having loved it and then gone back and watched it on Netflix, the small screeny goodness, do you think it held up? And then go from there.
So going back and watching this again a couple of years later, well, the first thing that really hit me was that this is like the exact same movie as Mad Max Fury Road.
It is. I was thinking about that while I was watching it.
Yeah, but this one I like. I was aware of the issues in this movie the first time I saw it. There's a lot of oh, we're just not going to explain that. Oh, we're just not going to explain that. In this context, I can accept it a bit. I have a list of things that just made no sense at all. But I feel like this is, because it's a smaller step away from the world as we know it today, it feels a little bit more accessible. I do like this movie a lot. I like it in almost every respect. From acting, directing, design, script, themes. Yes, I like this movie. How about you?
I explained with Mad Max that I liked the movie, but I didn't think it was a good movie. With Snowpiercer, I like it, and I think it's a good movie. And much like you, I think it's a good movie in basically every aspect. I think it's well scripted, it was well cast and performed. The cinematography is amazing, and I think it does so many things to further the story on that. And I think it's, as we were mentioning, it's very similar to Mad Max Fury Road, only they establish a universe that works. They establish a timeline that we can follow. They establish characters that we care about. And it does hold up 2 years later, even on the small screen. It's not a movie that requires tons of special effects or flashbangy things in order to be successful and tell a good story.
Right. The movie is about individuals running into each other, either physically or ideologically.
Yes.
So the confined spaces that it happens in really support that.
And I think it's one of those things where they did an excellent job with their set design and cinematography in creating a balance of having expansive space of this train, which has now basically become the world and civilization, but still creating many elements that were extremely claustrophobic and creating those ideas of people having to sort of exist on top of each other.
So the characters in the movie use the train metaphorically the same way the filmmakers use the train metaphorically. You get to the very end of the movie, Wilfred, the guy in the front car,
Great Wilfred!
literally says, "The train is the world." This is not a subtle message, but it doesn't feel fake coming out of the character's mouth.
Sometimes I think you just have to deliver your message with a mallet. You have, them explaining to you as they're going through the aquarium, oh, it's a closed ecosystem. And then you have that monologue almost verbatim at the end coming from Wilfred talking about the people.
And to me, the movie starts from the idea of people tried to fix global warming and screwed up the world. It's about attempting to control any system without having a full understanding of it.
You sort of get the impression pretty much it's like, now if mankind hadn't tried to make this huge, drastic attempt to fix things instead of just gradually being a little more responsible, that things wouldn't have happened the way they did.
See, the message I got from it was this train was not intended as an arc to save humanity. It was an indulgence for the rich. The survival of humanity depends on these rich people indulging themselves all the time.
The train started as this luxury liner, but he then adapted.
It's totally that message of, like, you people need us. But at the same time, the rich rely on the poor on this train. They need this supply of industrial waste drugs that comes from the back of the train, apparently.
Yes.
They need a disposable workforce. But I feel like the biggest thing that they need is someone to compare themselves to.
I heard old tales sectioners were lazy dogs who slept all day in their own shit.
So the other big theme of this movie for me is leadership. And both who is qualified to lead and what being a leader does to the person who's in that position. Curtis starts off as this very idealistic, populist. Over the course of the movie, he starts lying to his friends, he lets his friends die, he tortures people, he executes prisoners, and by the end of everything, he has come to a point where he's now on the complete opposite end of the spectrum. Some people suffer and some people die because we have to look after the whole.
You know, you still have those points of Curtis saying all along, like, I don't want to lead.
I'm not a leader.
Relying on the input of Mr. Gillian.
Mm-hmm.
And then he sort of gets forced, in a way, into the leadership position. One of the other major themes in the movie is free will versus predestination. He wants to believe that he has a choice, whereas Wilfred explains to him, you don't have a choice. Things are what they are. Life is what it is. This is your preordained place. There's a very literal moving forward. Anytime Curtis is thinking about giving up or he's reflecting on who he was, they have him moving screen left, going back towards the back of the train. The times that he's growing his character and fighting for people and making proactive choices, they have him moving screen right.
I wouldn't say he's necessarily doing things on behalf of others when he's moving forward, but he's definitely moving into, like, a new perception of, you know, the world that he lives in.
Right. Well, I mean, and often when he's moving forward, it's still those conscious choices.
For me, like, that's where this movie is different from Fury Road. Fury Road was about people who are being chased and have to do things because they're being chased. This is a movie about people who are choosing to change their own situation. I think that story exists in Fury Road, but it's not the perspective that we're seeing the story from. The people choosing to change their situation in there happened before the movie started. And here's where Snowpiercer is pretty bleak. The fundamental message of this movie, to me, is if you try to change the system, you can't possibly understand it well enough, and you are going to end up killing everybody. This takes place in 2031.
Yes.
Like theoretically, the events of the opening voiceover happened essentially when the movie was released. It feels current, especially when you compare it to post-nuclear war apocalypse movies.
You don't see drastic changes in styles of clothing or anything like that. It's all a very 2014 feel. And I also like the fact that they talk about things being extinct. Okay, so they didn't necessarily think when they were, building their agricultural car to plant tobacco.
Cigarettes have been extinct for more than 10 years now.
Right, like this was not a system that was designed to provide for everyone forever. I feel like I've got to talk a little bit about the completely ludicrous things in this movie. These will sort of go sequentially. And now I realize that, like, many of these revolve around one scene. They finally work out, all right, we'll give you 2 cubes of Krunol for every door that you open for us. It's not like a 10-car train. This is, like, presumably, like, miles long. So who's carrying this enormous backpack full of drugs to keep passing out to this guy?
I think it doesn't matter how long the train is. There are only security doors between some of the things.
I will accept that.
Okay.
But so now they're getting through their first sort of like area, and they're like, oh, it looks like everybody left really fast. Let's open the door. And Chick, okay, why does this girl have to be psychic? We don't need a psychic girl on this movie.
Don't open it.
But anyway, they open the door, and there's like 100 guys with axes. Why are there all of these axes on this train? You know what we need? A bunch of really nice steel axes. There needed to be a whole train car somewhere full of axes.
There might be. There might be a train car full of axes. There might be, like, a Smitty car.
And then all of a sudden they have, like, 60 torches.
Yeah, that
Where
one
did
was...
they get all these torches from?
I can accept that you can make torches out of just about anything, but
they had them.
I don't know why they
instantly.
had them there.
So next up, why is there this completely empty train car for them to fight in?
It wasn't empty. It used to be full of axes.
Here is my favorite ridiculous moment in the entire movie. At the front end of that train car, there's a little sign on the wall that says, "Emergency stop." Why has that not been dismantled? If I had any sort of authority on this train, and we were like, oh wow, if this train stops, the entire human race will blink out of existence. I think one of the first things I would do is send one of my guys around to, weld a steel plate over every single emergency stop lever.
Because this is my favorite implausible thing in the movie. As we're going around this, like, tight turn, our hero and our protagonist are going to somehow shoot across windows at each other and have any sort of measure of accuracy?
I don't buy that Curtis could make those shots. He has presumably never handled a gun before in his life. So here's my last thing that just I don't quite get. So how fast would you say this train is going?
Yeah, it makes this whole, like, transcontinental trip in a year.
Like, it's hitting these ice barricades with enough force that, like, the whole train shakes off its tracks and,
Right. At least 80? Probably faster because train.
Right, because that's why would you be on a train if you're not going to go fast? They say that the train makes its 438,000 kilometer journey every year. So, in a year, there are 8,765.81 hours. So we take those numbers and we figure out that this train is going 50 kilometers per hour on average. 31 miles an hour. I get that maybe it would go faster downhill and it would go slower uphill, but we always see this train as this, like, this juggernaut of, force that's...
And I sort of get, like, maybe when the train was first designed, it's like, yeah, we're only going to go, like, 30, 35 miles an hour, because it's a leisurely train ride. You don't want the whole, like, vibrations of a quick-paced train.
But it's still making the same journey in 1 year. We need the audience to feel like the train is really fast, because that's more exciting.
It looks slightly more spectacular as it barrels through things if we've set it up to look like it moves along at this nice clip.
What's next?
Well, it is a world that is remarkably devoid of women. When it comes right down to it, we have 2 female characters. 2.5 female characters. We'll give the teacher a little bit of a nod there.
You have another half character in what's-his-name's assistant. Wilfred's assistant.
But yeah, really, you have Tanya, Timothy's mom, and like she's there like fighting and everything, which is great. You have Minister Mason, who they still call Sir, which I sort of appreciated.
And also, I love Tilda Swinton, so
yes,
she can do no wrong.
Like, Minister Mason is my favorite character in the whole movie. She's the one who is really the most representative of what the society is.
Yes, she has bought into the system. She is totally looking out for herself.
And she has some of the best lines in the entire movie. You suffer from the misplaced optimism of the Doom. I love that line. It's like, no, it's all just gonna end poorly no matter what, but you just keep trying. We don't have any women in this world aside from Mason in these positions of strength or power.
Yes, this is very much a male movie about what it means to be like a father or a male leader. Yeah, and even the mom who comes along she's a contrast to the men who are trying to lead this revolution.
Right.
That she's not going on the revolution for the people, she's going on it for her child.
Please.
I feel like that back of the train culture would be so pragmatic, that they're not going to turn down somebody just based on their gender.
But no, I mean, there's hardly any women in the movie at all.
They're sitting in the sauna, they're having their hair done, they're at the party, they're in the pool.
But still, like I said, in the contrast to that, Minister Mason is one of the most interesting characters in the movie.
She doesn't have to be likable in any way. When the writers, directors, and actors don't feel like, oh, I have to make you sympathetic to my character.
She's sort of embraced this world and is making the best of it that anyone possibly can.
Right. She really, I think, understands the system and believes in it even more than Wilfred does. She really believes that this is the only way for the world to be.
She's the only one in the know about everything that's going on. And we kill her off halfway through the movie.
Which is also the point where the organization from the front of the train breaks down. The security chief, who sort of goes a little nuts, he's a tool. I mean, I guess in both the literal and metaphorical sense. Suddenly there's nobody directing that killing tool.
He was so used to structure and organization and never really being contested in any way. A nice, very typical conservation shot of the effects of global warming. It's almost always like a lone polar bear somewhere being sad.
See, the thing to me, the last shot of the movie isn't about, like, oh, the world is doomed. It's about the fact that, like, the world will be fine without us. We take all these actions constantly without understanding all of the ramifications. And now these people have destroyed the little scrap of world that was left to them. There's no resources around for them to live on. So they're going to be dead within a week.
Oh, yeah.
If that polar bear doesn't come eat them right now.
I remembered the train crash. The magnitude of it hadn't stuck with me as much.
Like, oh, the train sort of crashes and falls over.
Right. But no, they actually take the time. They take like 3.5 minutes.
I think you might be exaggerating, but it's long.
We're going to show you parts of this train ripping off and falling down, these deep cavernous ravines.
Yeah.
It's
individual train cars ripping into pieces as they,
everybody dies.
Yeah.
That's it. Everybody dies because one small group of people decided that they knew what was best, or that their own interests were more important than everyone else's.
Mm-hmm.
Which, sort of brings it all back to, hey, they decided they wanted to launch the CW7 off into the atmosphere. and they killed everybody.
Yeah, it doesn't matter if they know 17 words for snow. I don't see this as like an optimistic movie about like someone will survive. Or
No. This is very much a movie in which everybody dies and it's all of our own fault.
There aren't innocent people in this movie. The hero is someone who has eaten babies.
I know that babies taste best.
In Snowpiercer, we have a post-apocalyptic world in which they've given us a very solid timeline. They've given us causality. They've created both an internal and external world that are plausible. The story that's told to us about humanity as a whole and individual pieces of humanity by characters who are fairly well fleshed out and likable. And I use likable in that whole they're fine characters to watch.
I agree with that. If you can accept that at times the movie takes jumps in terms of both time and distance on the train, this movie is both interesting and a lot of fun. I think the last movie that intrigued me on both of those levels the way this one did was probably The Matrix. Also had all of these like sort of weird philosophical ramifications, but
Right.
also at its sort of core didn't make any sense at all. I like this movie. I think anybody should go see it. Oh, we need to rate this, don't we? How many implausible train axes do you rate this movie?
I give Snowpiercer a very solid 4.5 implausible train axes.
Exact same spot, 4.5 implausible train axes for me. So overall, we come out at a 4.5 implausible train axes for Snowpiercer. I think that is a definite go see this movie.
So thank you all for joining us in this particular installment of The Naked Critics. And remember, Wilfred is forever!
And if the engine stops, we all freeze and die.
What happens if the engine stops? We all freeze and die. But will it stop?